Welcome everybody back here at Veil of Sound. Welcome back to our Christmas marathon, and welcome back to one of those people. Yeah, I'm very sure he would not like the term living legend, but in non-mainstream circles, this guy is a legend. I'm very, very happy to have JG Thirlwell from Foetus here on the show. So, JG, thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is wonderful. And he and I said, okay, let's focus on the first years of his career, also leading up
Right,
to
you
it.
said that. I didn't say that.
Yeah, but you agreed to it.
Yeah, well, I hope we can mention what I've been working on now too.
We will. We will come to a few things. Also, something that you've released this year, and also a few certain awards that you have won over the last couple of years.
Hmm.
And you see, we could talk with this man for hours and hours and hours.
Hmm.
But I first have to ask, being a German, I have to ask the following question. How verklemmt are you?
How verklempt am I?
Yeah, I guess you know what the
I'm not
German word
verklempt
means,
right
right?
not this second. Well, it's used in I don't know if it's used in German in the same way as it's used in America.
So how is
Um,
it used in the States?
in America, it's like getting a bit choked up and emotional and like you get a
Ah,
cry. Yeah.
then it's a little different from the German meaning. It is something
Yeah.
like coy, shy, sexually inexperienced,
Oh, interesting.
something
Yeah.
like that.
That's not
Uh,
how I read it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like there are many of the words that also are English and that we in Germany use in a very different way. Best example is the plastic thing that every worldwide is calling a mobile. We call it a handy. I don't know why.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but um um it could be I'm not sure what the derivation and how it ended up in that usage in America. It could have sort of filtered through Yiddish or something. I'm not sure, you know.
To clue it up, Verklemmt is one of the track titles on one of JG's or one of Foetus's greatest records, at least for me. I think all of his records are good, but Gash is a real great thing, also because it was the first record that I ever heard and listened to
Oh,
by Foetus.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Not because the other stuff before isn't cool, but it was 1994. I just got into alternative music a few years before, and that was the record that I first heard by Foetus, and I immediately fell for the sound of it. Also, because yeah, it reminded a lot of people of Nine Inch Nails, although of course it's the other way around. We'll come to that.
Hmm.
JG, I said, looking at your career is difficult. You are, I think, 45 years in being a musician, a releasing, publishing musician now, something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and you've done a lot of work for Foetus, for your other bands, for example, Steroid Maximus, that we'll also talk about. And you've also done a lot of, for example, scores over the last years.
Mhm.
And so I thought, like, okay, which points, maybe the point where it changed from JG, the free time hobby musician, to JG, the the guy who really wanted to become a professional, who really was a professional musician. And I would like to hear if that is true. Is it true that a flatmate of yours in the late 70s basically pushed you or told you to become a working musician, joining a band? I
Well,
think it was Prague Vec.
yeah, I hadn't, at that point, I had, I was living in London. I was living in a squat. My roommate at the time actually was Keith Allen, who was a comedian and went on to make a bunch of TV and film stuff. And Keith, so I would sit in my bedroom with my a couple of synthesizers and my bass and some pedals and make tapes and so on. And he said, like, you've got to get out from your bedroom and get out and play with people. I'm friends with, Sue and John from Pragvec. They've lost their rhythm section and they're looking to find other people to play with. Why don't you go and hook up with them? And they lived nearby. And so I connected with them and then I went over and met with them, and they were also using a synthesizer. And so we started working together a bit and playing their songs, and we made an album. And that experience working in a democratic way, even though like Sue and John were writing the songs, so it wasn't really democratic. That really led me to the conclusion that I didn't want to be in a band. I didn't want to work with other people, and that I would rather do a project where I played all the instruments and it would either succeed or fail. If it succeeded or failed, it would all be on me, and it wouldn't be, I would have to tolerate, other people's input and stuff. It could be fully my input and fully my
Mm-hmm.
vision. So that was really the catalyst of Foetus. And that was probably among my first experiences in professional recording studios, so too, as I was recording with Pragvec. And around the same time, I met Steve Stapleton from Nurse with Wound, and I started recording with him as well.
But then it was already for you somewhat clear from the beginning, okay, this is my band. I want to play all the instruments. But I also looked it up, apart from synths and other instruments that are more or less normal, you basically did everything yourself. Was there also a little sense of naivety to it? Like, okay, I might not be good at everything, but I want to do everything.
I think you could say naivety was one way of putting it. I would say audacity is a different way of putting it. I had the audacity of youth where even though I wasn't, and still I'm not a great instrumentalist, I wanted to play every note on it. I wanted to keep that purity. And that's what I did for the first up until Gash, actually. On every Foetus record I played every note. And when I started making the first Foetus single I made in 1980, the end of 1980, and that was pre-MIDI, pre-sampling. There were, I used a lot of the stuff that most of the things that I was doing were acoustic. And I had a couple of synthesizers. I had a Wasp and a Korg MS-20, and I was also using the studio and learning about the studio and using multi-tracking and bouncing tracks together. And I would go in with a game plan of what order I should record things in. If I want to have like 10 backing vocals on this song, I would realize that I would have to do all the backing vocals the very first thing, because there's not going to be enough tracks left, because I was working in an 8-track studio. And so it was and some of and usually there wasn't much outboard. There wouldn't be I don't even know if I had the first studio I worked in had a reverb, probably a plate reverb, but maybe a delay, or better in those days they used tape delay as well. But one of the studios that I did a lot of my work in, Lavender Sound, I think they only had one effects unit, and it was maybe a delay, something. And so I discovered things like vary speeds, like slowing the tape up, tape down and speeding the tape up. And I was from the very start, I was employing the kind of technology, I guess, which later became referred to as sampling.
Mm-hmm.
But where I was coming from was stuff like musique concrète and
Mm-hmm.
Steve Reich's tape experiments and things like that, just where I'd heard this stuff used before. And um, so using found sounds as tools and loops as compositional devices. So I was, using tape loops, changing the speed on tape loops. I would compile cassettes of sound effects and different snippets that I thought were interesting and useful. And I would have this stack of cassettes, and sometimes I would just like, this track needs a little flavor, and I would go
Mm-hmm.
through the cassettes, find something, and then cue up the tape and cue up the cassette player and find the right pitch. And then I'd have the engineer punch the record button, and just at the right point, I would unmute, unpause the cassette, and then that would go in. And so it was like building up um, these universes, these sound universes with acoustic stuff, very speed tape, but it was all very organized. I mean, when I went into the studio, I had everything mapped out. Um, the way that it was all composed before I went in. There wasn't a lot of randomness, and I mean, there was experimentation, but there wasn't a lot of improvisation.
Mm-hmm. That basically leads to, for me at least, two or three questions. You've already mentioned, for example, Steve Reich, uh, neoclassical composer of the 20th century, 21st century. Um, were there other bands, projects, artists that influenced you in your way you composed your tracks, in the way that you also dealt with field recordings, as we would call them nowadays?
Yeah, well, around the late 70s, I discovered like Stockhausen and John Cage, and mainly because I was working in a record store, and there, you would get cutouts, which were like records that were no longer in circulation and stuff like that. And so that was my crash course in 20th century um, classical music, and so I was really devouring stuff like that. And then when I was hearing that sort of thing, I wanted to delve deeper, and I started reading about those people, and then I started reading about writings of John Cage and how he came to his conclusions, and the same with Stockhausen. And then Steve Stapleton turned me on to a whole lot of stuff. But also, you got to remember at that time in the late 70s, people like Philip Glass and Steve Reich were touring with their own ensembles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw Philip Glass play with his ensemble in London, and I saw Steve Reich perform drumming in London around about when, well, that must have been actually it was probably around about in the early 80s. And that was one of the most, inspirational and, celestial musical experiences I've ever had, and that, and the whole stuff that he was doing was phasing, was blowing my mind. And and then I went back, and when I discovered the early tape experiments, like Come Out and It's Gonna Rain and stuff. I mean, that stuff really blew my mind. But at the same time, that's not all I was influenced by, because I was also influenced by like what was happening in London at the time, which was like post-punk and the independent music scene, like everyone from like This Heat and Swell Maps and Raincoats and the pop group and Throbbing Gristle and Joy Division was just such an
Psychic TV, probably, right?
Well, this is way before Psychic TV. And so there was a very fertile time musically. I mean, I would say that punk rock was kind of my big bang, because it taught me that I was already a music fanatic, but punk rock taught me that you didn't have to be a virtuoso to pick up an instrument. And then Steve Stapleton taught me that you don't even need an instrument. You can make sound with anything,
Yeah.
And But so, you know, these ecosystems, like from, random composition and stuff like that, and then the independent music scene, but also everything that I'd heard up until that point in my entire life was sucked into my DNA, everything from Bowie to Sparks to Can and Roxy Music to other stuff that I was probably really interested in that time was James Brown and um, um, Funkadelic, and hip hop was just starting, and Kraftwerk and stuff like that. So it all went into the pot. And it's sort of I had visions of how I wanted it to come out, and it didn't always come out. There was often a disconnect with what I heard in my head to what actually I ended up with on tape. But there had to be, a guiding force of like hearing what I was accomplishing as I went along, and that suggesting something else and following my nose with that. And sometimes I'd end up with different conclusions, um, and so I was, and also because of monetary constraints, I was working really fast, so I was making a lot of just decisions on the fly. I mean, in the first 18 months that I was releasing stuff on my label, I released 2 albums and 3 7-inches and 12-inch EP, so I was pretty prolific.
Yeah, but that is definitely a very good word to describe it. So would you describe yourself as one of these pastiche cut and rearrange artists? Because whenever listening to, let's say, three records, three Foetus records from three different decades, it sometimes seems as if it cannot be the same artist, which is, I think, one of the best things one can say about an artist. Is there something like, okay, because of listening to different stuff, because of new possibilities when recording, you are not bound to one genre, but it's always like I make my own genre, I mix everything together that influences me at that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think as time has gone by, I've been able to realize um, what's in a closer approximation of what's in my head, and make that a reality. But the other thing is that I don't really want to repeat myself, and so each time I've come to make it a record as Foetus. I can't help but there be some strands of what I've done before because I'm me, but I also don't want to just regurgitate what I've done before, and I want to bring new things in. I kind of like, in a lot of ways, I want to rewrite, rewrite the book and rewrite, music, create a new musical style, or wipe the slate in some ways. But there are other things that carry through. And that for that very reason, is why I've just finished working on the final Foetus album, which just got mastered and should be out by the time this comes out. And it took me 8 years to create because I had to think, okay, in some ways I want to do stuff I've never done before, but I want it to have reference to what's happened in the entire arc of what Foetus is. I wanted to put a bow on the whole thing and like tie up this 45-year, 10-album journey. And that made it very difficult. That's why it's so refreshing to start a new project like Manorexia or Zolodox or something, because I don't have the baggage of having created a big body of work under that name before.
Yeah.
And also there aren't any rules yet. So each project kind of has rules. The rules become apparent as the project forges an identity. Like Manorexia, for example, I thought was going to be kind of a drone project, but it became a kind of a contemporary classical project. Zordox, I always had rules that it was going to be all synthesizers, and I wasn't going to use drum sounds per se. All the percussive sounds come from synths. Um, and then so it's refreshing to start with because you have a blank canvas. And then as soon as you've done a couple of albums, or it's 2 or 3 albums under that name, I go, oh, okay, well, I can't really just repeat what I've done before, but it also has to be better than what I've
Yeah.
done before.
Yeah, and I
So
think,
that's
is there
very,
also a moment when at a certain point in a project's life, you see, okay, I've had those rules up to now. I would either have to start a new project or I would have to change the rules. What do you do then? Do you change the rules or
well,
do you start a new
that's how,
project?
yeah, that's how Steroid Maximus started because Foetus was becoming increasingly like almost 50% instrumental.
Instrumental. Yeah.
And then I decided, okay, I'm going to spin off the new project, which became
Hmm.
Steroid Maximus, and that's going to be all instrumental and take the burden, take the instrumental stuff away from Foetus. And that's how that came about. And also, it gave me a chance to collaborate with some people, which I did
Hmm.
on the first couple of albums, and create a new musical vista to explore. Which at the time when I created it, I had a couple of phrases that I used to hang things on. One of which was music, ethnic music for a civilization that is yet to exist, and soundtracks for a film that is yet to be
Mm.
created. And that the latter of which has become a bit of a trope or a bit of a cliche, but at
Yeah.
the time people weren't really doing that. So people weren't really making instrumental albums. So
Yeah, and
uh,
basically you're going the opposite way. You are now making music for films that do exist.
yeah, and that came about because of Steroid Maximus.
Mm.
Because, well, specifically the Venture Brothers, which was a cartoon that I did the score for about 20 years. Um, that came about because the director heard Steroid Maximus and thought that the musical universe that I was inhabiting was similar to the universe that he was creating
Mm.
in his scripts. So that's how we got together.
And then I have to ask a question. You said that you like to form the rules for your projects, but when you score, it's like the Venture Brothers or Archer, who what we'll come to later, but then you also get rules from an outside. How is
Yeah.
that for you?
It's been really good actually. Because normally I'm kind of a control freak. It's a different um, discipline when you're working on scoring because you are at the service of the project. And my job as the provider of the soundtrack is to elevate the project, to listen to the director and
Mhm.
um, get a sense of what his or her vision is for this project and do the best that I can to help them realize that and to make the project better. And of course, I brought a lot of my, a fair bit of my personality into it. It's not, but um, I wouldn't say it's really in my experiences with particularly when I've been in the trenches and working on TV and which is quite time consuming and there's a hell of a lot of work. I haven't found it as like, an area in which to necessarily experiment, but more I've I've it's made me a much better composer just by the sheer volume of work that I've done because I've done, between all the shows that I've done, I've did about 170 episodes of TV. Um, and then I've done well, a few features, maybe 3 or 4 features, and then maybe about 10 more, 10 or 20 short films. Um, so, um, it's just made me better at what I do, and what made me work faster. And um, so I really have that to thank. It's the whole Malcolm Gladwell thing of putting in 10,000 hours and work on something. All of a sudden, I found the work was easier
Mhm.
and I was faster.
And did you also see faster or more easily, okay, this track is now finished?
When are you talking about scoring or?
Yeah. Or also then again for your own projects, for example, for Foetus.
Well, it's definitely, each project I do informs the next,
Yeah.
and I can get if I if I get something out of my system in one project, then it's probably not going to show up somewhere else. I
Mhm.
mean, all of my sort of steroid maximus urges have been satiated in the last 20 years
Mhm.
by Venture Brothers and Archer. So I haven't felt the need to do a steroid maximus album because I've done so much of the type of material that
Mhm.
might up on a steroid maximus album in those projects. And I mean, I've just released a third Venture Brothers soundtrack
Mhm.
album. Next year, I'm doing another Archer soundtrack album, which will be a streaming only, but it'll be a very long one.
Mhm.
And I feel like um, I've got a lot of that stuff out of my system
Mhm.
with between those projects. Um, so that might not show up in, that may be the reason of the absence of any steroid maximus material.
Let's jump back to the late 70s, early 80s. When looking at the first Foetus releases, and especially at the record, one has the feeling as if there is somebody who, you've already mentioned, control freak, but who also had a very, very clear audio vision and also real visual vision of what Foetus should be like. When looking at the first, I don't know, I think it was like 10, 13 years of Foetus, more or less. All the covers, for example, were three, all the covers had more or less only three colors. It was black, white, red.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jack White, who basically stole that from you. Just a joke. We have the four-letter titles, something that the Jesus Lizard also did a few years later. Uh, we have a lot of things
They
where
did
one
two.
has.
They used two syllables though. Mine are all one syllable. And
They also have a few where it's only one, isn't it?
no, some of those are one syllable, but
Yeah,
they did liar, which is
yeah,
two syllables.
liar, but go. The last
So,
one is definitely only one syllable. It's rack.
yeah.
But I know what you mean. Yes. So then the question must also, of course, be the you hinted at a final Foetus album, and I was already thinking in my head, okay, how could he end that with one syllable and four letters? Is it fate?
HALT.
Oh, even better. Hmm. Yeah, it's also better to halt than to fate. But how much energy, how much time did you invest into this concept?
Well, I already had. I mean, I went to art school, and
Mhm.
um, the I had already started working in that color palette
Mhm.
in art school before I had any aspirations of doing musical projects. So
Mhm.
I was very interested in pop art, but also kind of the more revolutionary art from the 20s, like Russian constructivism, like Rodchenko and constructivists, and Dadaism, and then also propaganda, and so I I liked the idea of melding Chinese communism, World War II, and Spanish Revolutionary War, and all of these things kind of melded together. So
Mhm.
kind of making the political bent of it kind of a bit blurred, like where it's coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, really the design thrust was kind of coming from constructivism, and but also pop art and packaging, you know.
Mhm.
And so in art school, and then I discovered, I mean, I was learning, you know, doing drawing and painting and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
then what the what led me to that the sort of design conclusions was when I did a printmaking class and I did some screen prints. And then that was the first time I did this red, white, black stuff.
Mhm.
And I was taking, you know, I was doing these kind of constructivist looking images of buildings and stuff, and using tonal dropout because that was you know, because I had to use very blocky colors because it was a screen print. And that's kind of what led me to that conclusion. And then I started doing paintings like that. Like my paintings were then impersonating my screen prints.
Mhm.
And and that's how I sort of, you know, came to that conclusion. And, you know, the other thing I liked about screen printing was that you could make multiples and, you know, they were all kind of originals and you numbered them. And that's when I started making records. I
Mhm.
thought that about my records, that they were kind of all, you know, an original piece of artwork that were multiples. And that kind of comes from the whole, you know, Andy Warhol kind of philosophy as well,
Mhm.
uh, of you know, the product being a piece of art and the art being a piece of product. Um,
Mhm.
and and also, yeah, and then I started integrating ideas of packaging into it and like looking at boxes of soap and things like that, and like, you know, the simplicity of designs. And then when you see your work in the context of a record store, especially back in those days when people would have racks, you know, I had this idea that I wanted to create designs that if your eye scanned the entire record store, your eye would fall on that one
It
record.
pops out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question, as you just mentioned Warhol, and there is something about Warhol that is always connected to me to the question of, is everything art or is nothing art? What would you say? Everything is art or
No,
everything can be art?
no, I wouldn't say everything is art and everything can be art. I mean,
Mhm.
um, uh, that's that's more of a that's more like a philosophical
Mhm.
thing. But no, I don't approach things like that. I
Mhm.
create art. I do
Mhm.
think that there are people that don't create art and their very existence is a work of art.
Kardashians.
What's that?
The Kardashians.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I
No,
think that fits perfectly to what you're saying. Like,
no, no. That's not what I mean at all.
but let's get back to those beginnings, and also to something that struck me again, looking at your oeuvre. Um, would you describe yourself as a workaholic or somebody who just likes to work?
I would say that well, I wouldn't say I'm a workaholic. I would say
Hmm.
that I'm someone that really likes to work. I
Hmm.
really do like to work. Um, but also my work um, uh, gives my life meaning.
Hmm.
And it gives me self-esteem.
Hmm.
And so that um, that if I don't work, I feel worthless.
Okay.
So I don't
I
think
see.
that those are the same. You know, I wouldn't say that. It's not as simple as that, but
Hmm.
my work gives me a sense of self-worth, has given me a sense of worth, and it gives me a sense of purpose. And I feel like that when I leave this mortal coil, that's my work is my progeny. My work is the footsteps that I will leave in the sand. And that's kind of important to me.
Hmm.
That, in terms of leaving this, some people don't care about leaving a footprint. I do
Hmm.
want to, I want to leave a footprint. And
Hmm.
I've created this legacy.
Hmm. Um, it's a very interesting idea. Um, it's also interesting because, mm, I mean, like you are now in a 45, in a basically in a career that it's spanning from the late 70s to the middle of the 2020s. So it's like nearly in six different decades, right?
Yeah,
Um, and still you have that. Mm, you have that drive. Let's maybe use that word.
yeah.
Um, has there ever been a point in your whole career, maybe at the beginning, maybe in the middle, maybe now, where you said like, okay, I really, really did something gigantic, something great, something that I really like and that I will like in 20 years' time?
I've had that feeling when at the completion of a big
Mhm.
project.
Mhm.
But that feeling only lasts for like maybe an hour.
I would have expected you to say for a week, but an
No,
hour.
no, no, not long. It doesn't. Maybe the next day I'm ready for the next thing. I would probably, I'm probably looking at my watch going, yeah, that's good, but I have to get working on this other thing. Um, I work on like a lot of different things concurrently, and they're all in different stages of
Mhm.
completion at
Mhm.
different times. So I'm never done,
Mhm.
and like, uh, one of the reasons I'm being super prolific right now is, like this year I'm releasing 3 albums. Next year I'm releasing 4. The following year I have two planned, but there might be more.
Mhm.
Um, is that I kind of looked at I had a list of albums that I want to make,
Mhm.
and I was like, if I make an album a year, I'm
It
going to be
doesn't work.
99 by the time I've done this list. So, I have to really,
Mhm.
up my output now. So that's, so now I'm kind of in this work mode of like, okay, let's imagine I've got 6 months to live and what's going to be the next thing,
How much can I put into it? Yeah. Are you and also looking at all the projects that you've done and look at whether they are completed or not, whether you still have to add something? Is that something that you do?
Um, I don't really look back too much. Uh, but I do look at each project as a kind of a small body of work,
Mhm.
and I like, you know, I like the fact that there's kind of a Manorexia trilogy. There's a
Mhm.
third Max trilogy. There's a Zordox trilogy, and I thought that might be the end of it, but I'm
Mhm.
going to continue doing Zordox.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that, the trilogy thing is you can say a lot in like that triumvirate. I
Yeah.
mean, look at the first Three Stooges albums, for example. I mean, that's like everything you need to say.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so
The movie nerd would say, look at the first three in publishing order, the first three Star Wars movies. We wouldn't have needed six more.
oh well, we've made a hell of a lot of money for them.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
I mean, I like Quentin Tarantino's vision where he said he's gonna do 10 and done,
Mm. He's
Um,
closing in on them, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, this is the end of Foetus. This is the final album that I'm releasing this year. But each album in the last 20 years, has had a companion album. And the
Mm.
companion album has like outtakes and songs that were recorded around the same time and threads that didn't get completed in that album.
Mm.
And so there is going to be a companion album to the final Foetus album. That won't come out for a couple of years. And then I may or may not feel like I've said everything that I need to say. I mean, I'm going to do a little bit of anthologizing. I need to do an anthology of early singles, which I promised for a long time. And um, then who knows? Maybe it'll be like Star Wars.
Okay,
Might have to be,
let's say it
that
like that.
might have to be
If there is one
2.0.
person who deserves some money, then
Might have to
I'd
be
rather
two,
give it to you than to Lucas.
might have to be Foetus 2.0.
Um, so we have now looked at the early beginnings. We haven't mentioned that you moved from Australia to London, and now I think one of the next milestones in your career is the move to New York City in
Yeah,
'83.
yeah.
Um, I think it's now clear how the London scene and the UK scene, how that influenced your work.
Hmm.
Um, Is there something in the records that followed, in the records after that move? And I'm not only talking about Weissblood, also, for example, like Nail and Thaw and Rife. Is there something where you say, okay, that is a New York City element to my music?
I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, all of that post New York stuff that I wrote, there's not just threads of New York, but threads of the United States in it.
Hmm.
And culturally,
Hmm.
what's culturally, politically, um, the work has really been informed by that.
Hmm.
I mean, not full, it's not just the entirety of it's not the only thing it's about, but I can pinpoint certain things that, yeah, I mean, that song is about LA, or that song is about this newspaper story that was in the tabloids in 1984 or something like that, or, like things like that. Yeah. I mean, I'm the, all of the influences and the stuff that comes into my head and then gets spewed out on those records. It comes from very disparate places, but I'm a real sponge for culture and what's around me, and it ends up in a mix.
Let's have a look at your scoring. And I worked through this London and New York thing to to build the next one. Would you guess that, for example, Archer would sound differently if you were still living in Australia, if you were still living in London?
Uh, yeah, I mean, because I'm sure I would be a different person,
Mm.
I,
Mm.
but I'm not sure about that. I mean, because really, I'm, I'm, I'd be a different person. I probably maybe have different type of skill set, from the different experiences that I've had.
Mm.
But at the same time, it's not to say that when I was living in Australia or living in the UK that I wasn't being besotted by cultural references from the United States,
Mm.
or I'm not exclusively absorbing cultural references from the United States, living in the United States. But what I did with Archer is what I felt the project needed, and a lot of that. And what I wanted to do with Archer was first to differentiate it in from the musical universe that I created from Venture Brothers,
Mm.
which meant I took it in a bit more of a noir direction,
Mm.
and it's probably jazzier than um, than Venture Brothers, although there's a lot of jazz in Venture Brothers too. Um, but I think uh, that it's also uh, Venture Brothers is a little bit crazier.
A little
Um,
quirkier, right?
yeah, it's a little bit it has this sort of insanity to it, and I think I wanted to create something which was more just a straight, more like a score
Mm.
for Archie, more of a bit more of a noirish world. Um, but that's not to say that I couldn't create that in London. Actually, when I was down in Australia in 2023, I ended up scoring the last two episodes of Archer down there.
So even when you go on holiday, you have to work.
Oh, I don't go on holiday.
Okay. And for everybody who has
No,
not
I
heard,
work. Okay.
yeah, and for everybody who has not
Vacation,
heard it,
my
with
vacation is
Archer,
not in my
yeah, you go.
vacation is not in my vocabulary.
Oh, you sound like my mom. She was also one of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah. For everybody who has not heard it, Mr. Thirlwell here is not just a highly respected musician in the music industry, but he is even praised by the movie industry because you got an Emmy for your score.
Oh, well, I didn't. No, the show got an Emmy.
Okay.
Uh, I didn't personally get the Emmy, but
If the soundtrack
it
wasn't
was.
good, you wouldn't have gotten it.
I'm not going to say that, but
I do.
but it was the it was. I mean, it was the first season that I worked on Archer that we got the Emmy for. So I have a little
See?
Emmy. I have a certificate, being part of the team. So yeah,
It's
yeah.
something that I always say, when I left the Michelin kitchen that I was trained in, they still had 2 stars. And when I left the year after, they only had 1 star.
Ah, well,
Huh?
you took the job with you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Put it on my house. My wife is now very happy about it.
yeah, yeah.
But let's be clear. To score an award-winning show, it's
Well,
interesting. I want to.
I wasn't not nominated for an award for Venture Brothers, um, and which I didn't win. I lost to Mickey Mouse, um, as we all do.
Yeah. But what I wanted to say is, and here I again want to circle little bit back to what you said before. I mean, like you scored a highly successful TV show, and even then, I'm very sure you said like, okay, cool award. I got string arrangements set in 2 hours. Let's work.
Yeah.
That is very prolific, JG. I mean, that is a work ethic that is every employer's dream. Um, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself first as a musician, a composer, a producer, a sound engineer, a record label owner, an artist, a visual artist? How does JG Thirlwell see JG Thirlwell?
Composer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then of course the question must be, I mean, like for Foetus and for basically all of the other projects, you write tracks or you compose tracks, but do you then already have the big picture in your head? Like, okay, this track is a chapter in the bigger story that I'm trying to get?
On my own work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually when I start a project or start a song, even, or a piece of music, I have an idea in my head of the musical universe that I want to create.
Mhm.
Sometimes, it's more complete than others. Sometimes I have the whole thing.
Mhm.
There has been times that I've dreamt a song and woken up really quickly and turned on the studio and I put the chords in and then put the structure that I heard in my head. That's only happened a few times, but usually I know I can figure out, I know what tempo it's going to be. I know what, or sonically where I want to go with it, or is it going to be a spacious piece? Is it going to be a drone piece? Is it going to be non-rhythmic, rhythmic? All of those things I have an idea in my head. Is it going to be a banger? Um, um, and then it's a matter of getting it out, and
Mhm.
um, figuring out the chords and figuring out the sounds and figuring out. And then you know, there is the nuts and bolts of it, and then there's the throwing a whole lot of shit at it, which I do sometimes, and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And then out of the stuff that I throw at it, what does that suggest something else? Does that suggest something new? And um, so yeah, it changes. But normally I don't go in and just sort of start improvising. I have some idea
Mhm.
what I'm trying to achieve.
Now, you said that you are working simultaneously on a lot of stuff, on a lot of different projects, a lot of different records. Is it automatically from the beginning clear? Okay, this is going to be a Foetus track. That is going to be a track for a score, or does
Yeah,
it develop? Is it clear?
yeah. I know where it's going to end up. Although sometimes things migrate. So
Yeah. To
I
every rule, there's an exception, right?
yeah, I start with something and I go, no, actually, you know what? This would be better over there.
Mm.
But normally they stay where they're meant to stay.
And then the next question is, I mean, like, as prolific and as productive as you describe your work ethic, and I'm very sure it's like, I don't want to say you write a track a day, but probably like a track a week minimum. But are there a lot of tracks where you also say like, okay, I still have those? You've mentioned the companion piece, I have those. It doesn't fit right now, but I'll keep it and maybe I'll come back to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of that. There's a lot of that. And then there's a lot of projects that are on the boil that have been on the boil for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're still gestating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of the albums that I have planned for release, they're actually all finished. I mean, they're all
Mm-hmm.
pretty much fit. Some of them are not mixed, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of written. And so there's a huge, I have a huge archive of
Mm-hmm.
stuff that yet to be released. Although, and then I have a big list of things that I want to write.
Mm-hmm.
And so I balance between finishing things off and starting on new things. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm big on lists. I make lists of things that need to be done and just work my
So,
way through.
so let's cut to it. The archive of unused songs, 3 digits or 4 digits?
Uh, I'd say three. It's in the three digits. Yeah. I mean, if I was to include all of the scoring stuff, of stuff that's unreleased,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say there's in the four digits, but of the stuff that's going to be released, that's in the three digits.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to release absolutely everything I ever did.
Then I'm very interested in it. I'm sorry. Um, I mean, like let's be honest. When we think of, for example, Hendrix, like there have been a few post-mortem Hendrix records, not released by him, authorized by his estate. How would you feel if somebody did with stuff that you didn't release yourself?
Well, that's what I'm trying to circumvent that by doing it all in my lifetime.
Yeah, but then you are not allowed to start new projects and stuff. So there
Yeah,
must
well,
be. But
I probably started the AI JP Thirlwell after I'm gone.
there is one more thing that I would like to talk about because I've read it up. Two more things, sorry, that I've read up, and I would just want to ask if that is true.
Cool.
Is it true that you joined Soft Cell on stage to do a suicide cover?
Yeah, very true. Oh yeah, we did that in when they were touring at about 83, I guess. We did that many times.
Mm-hmm.
We did it in London, we did it in the States, we did it on TV and it's on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. And then they're actually next month they're doing a deluxe reissue of one of their albums called The Art of Falling Apart, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a 6 album set. And so on that album, there's a kind of an updated version of that. It's the song Ghostwriter.
Yeah.
I did the vocals. Mark and I did the vocals a couple of years ago, and so that's the first proper recording of that. But then on that album, there is also, I think, a recording of the TV version that we did, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe a live version or something as well. So that'll be well documented. And yeah, that came out, and then when Soft Cell came and played in New York a few years ago on a comeback tour or whatever.
Mhm.
We did it again. So we did it a few years ago, and I think that's up on YouTube as well.
And then there is this I don't want to say infamous because it sounds just like a match made in heaven. The immaculate consumptive. Mm,
Yeah.
I've had confirmation over and over on the internet that Cave would at a certain point stop tracks and not finish them. Um, how is that for you? If somebody writes a track with you that you really like, and then he doesn't finish it on stage.
Well, that was Nick. The set always. We only did it 3 times. We did
Yeah,
3 shows.
yeah.
2 times down area in New York and once at the 930 Club in DC. And I believe each time, like the show ended with Nick doing the song "A Box for Black Paul," which was just him and piano. And then I pretty much think each time the show ended, he would just stopped halfway through. It's a very long song. It goes for
Yeah, it's
10
something like
minutes.
10 minutes, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so he would do it for about 5 minutes and then he would stop and go, okay. And then it goes on for about another 5 minutes like that. And then he would leave. And that would drive me crazy.
Last thing. You and Lydia Lunch released a collaboration called Stinkfist. Did Tool ever give you money for the title?
Stinkfist? No,
Yeah.
I think they ended up with, they kind of drew the same conclusions. I am aware of the Tool song Stinkfist. I think that they came up with their Stinkfist through
Other means.
other means. Yeah.
Um, something that I want to end up with that I haven't found online, but that I want to throw at you. And I think I think you will understand my reason for this comparison. In Hollywood, there is this Kevin Bacon factory. Like, how many corners do you have to go from Kevin Bacon to another actor?
Yeah, 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon.
Something like that, exactly. I would say there is also the same thing for J.G. Thirlwell when it comes to modern metal alternative music. Would you agree with that?
Degrees to
6 degrees to J.G. Thirlwell?
I don't know.
I think with you it could be 5.
Depends on who you start with, you know. I mean, I'm sure that
I always start with let's say we start with you, but do you know that it's only 2 corners from you to Nirvana, for example?
Well, that would probably be Buzz.
Dale.
Well, Dale, yeah, there's Dale, but then there's also Melvin's jump because Kurt produced Houdini.
Yeah.
Melvin album. Yeah. So
but you know what I mean, right? That is so impressive.
Well, how many degrees am I to Kevin Bacon though?
Wait.
That takes a bit of work.
I'm very sure Elfman scored something, and let's do it like this, JG. We have now covered the first 10 years, more or less, of your huge oeuvre. Next year, we'll do another one for the next 10 years, and by then, I will have find out how many degrees you are to Kevin Bacon.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah. The infamous quickfire round at the end. I had a lot of fun with this. I'll give you a few records from friends of yours, also bands you like, or from composers that you like. One of my
one or the other.
Yes.
Oh, and so someone's going to be picked up.
No. It's not one band versus the other. It's always. Let's start with the first one. 9 Inch Nails. Which record would you rather put on right now? The Downward Spiral or Pretty Hate Machine?
No, neither one of those. It would be the what's that double album?
The Fragile.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Mhm. Good choice. Swans, greed or filth?
Oh, depends on what mood I'd be in, you know.
Right, let's say right now.
Probably I haven't listened to Greed for a while, so I'd have to say Greed.
Mhm.
But you know, I like their latter day stuff a lot too. You know, the newer iteration of
Yeah.
songs as well.
Yeah, it's one of those bands where, I mean, like, I think there is no bad Swans record.
Yeah, yeah.
You can only differentiate them between loud and louder.
Longer and longer.
Oh, yeah, that's also good. Let's go back to Suicide. Which one would you rather listen to right now? Ghost Riders or the self-titled?
Well, Ghost Rider is on the self-titled album.
But isn't there, what is the second one? I forgot that. Sorry. My
The
weak
second
little
one
brain.
is called Alan Vega and Martin Rev.
Yeah, which one of
It's
those two would you listen to right now?
um I mean, I've listened to the first one so many times. I probably
Mhm.
I might maybe I'd listen to the second one just because I haven't listened to it so often. But they're
Mhm.
both really great albums.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
I've covered songs from each album. I
it's one
covered
of
Ghost Rider. I covered Ghost Rider
the
with
soft style.
Phil, and then I covered Harlem a couple of times at an Alan Vega tribute concert.
Well, I left out the whole cover thing and remix thing for our next interview because I have like 2 pages of questions that I would ask. So let's go to the next band. Robin Gristle, 20 Jazz Funk Greats or Second Annual Report?
20 Jazz Funk Greats.
Hmm? I have two more. No, three
Yeah.
more, sorry. Cave, From Here to Eternity, or No More Shall We Part? And I
Which one?
especially, No More Shall We Part. I
Oh, Nick
especially
Cave?
took those, yes, I took two very, very different periods in his
Which one would I
career.
listen to now?
Yes.
I mean, the second one I'm not so familiar with, so I probably listen to that one.
Mhm.
I don't like to listen to things that I know so much.
That is an interesting idea. Um, I said I want to ask at least one thing about composers. And I know that somewhere in one of the interviews you said that you really like Danny Elfman's work.
Hmm.
So I looked at some of his scores
Yeah.
and I came up with The Frighteners versus Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, I didn't know the Frighteners, so I'd have to listen to that one.
Mhm. It's
Yeah.
one of those thriller
Dude, that
horror
must be a really
things.
early. Is that an early one?
94, 95, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
And being German, I started with a German question or a German related question. I end with a German related question. I know that you love or that you like Einstürzende Neubauten.
Mhm. Mhm.
Kollaps or Haus der Lüge?
Oh, I would say Halva Mensch.
It was interesting. That was the first one that I thought of, and then I was like, everybody asked about Halber Mensch. Okay.
But Drawings of OT is an amazing album too.
Mm.
I mean, Collapse is great. They're all of those, all four of those are great. Um, I think I think like Halva Mensch is a really interesting album because of their embrace of technology in
Yeah.
that, and what what they were really using the studio, and because the other albums were so much more live,
Mm.
and they created something that was much, I mean, it was more of a studio thing.
Mm.
But the Drawings of OT, I think, has like this emotional core to it. It's
Mm.
like they've taken the Collapse is a lot more kind of like this sort of, it's kind of the energy of, imagine like an electrical wire comes down from a
Hmm.
post
Yeah.
and it's sparking on the ground and it's like
Yeah.
whipping around and it's got this kind of energy, like this danger energy kind of thing. And it's like when they got to the drawings of OT, they were able to, it's like they were able to harness that energy. And so um, you could have this kind of tension, and the darkness and then the explosions and stuff like that. And I think it's much more orchestrated and it has this beauty to it. And so I thought that, it's kind of a real distillation of where they were going at that time, which I really love that album.
Yeah, and it's also very immediate, right? It is a studio record, but it doesn't feel as if it's, for example, overproduced or something like that. I can see
no.
that appeal, yeah.
And then there's a track like Armenia on it, which is obviously it's like more of a tape collage thing, and but also very beautiful. And the where it sits on the album, it's like perfect. And yeah, vocals are really good. And there's a lot of variety in that album.
How do you feel then about a record like Silence is Sexy?
Uh, um, I think I think that
Because it's one of
I
those records where Neubauten fans are always divided about, is it too calm? Is it not punchy
I think
enough?
that they go on they have a vision of like where they want to go with their
Yeah,
project, and they you have to let them do that because
yeah.
they're carving their own path, and their records are one thing and then their live performance is another, so it's two very different ecosystems for them.
And that is something that you share with a lot of the artists that I chose for those quickfire questions. For a lot of these artists, one has a feeling as if there is a certain vision behind nearly everything that they do, or that every track, every record has a purpose. And that is something that you do not find too often nowadays. And that is one of the reasons, and that is what I want to end with. That is one of the reasons why I think so many people still follow your work so intensively, because, you know, it seems to have a purpose. And, you know, as we now know, we'll do another one.
Oh well,
We'll have, well,
all killer, no filler. That's my motto.
that is definitely true. But you know what I mean, right? It still is one cohesive picture, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
JG, thanks for this first interview. I'm already looking forward to the next one.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your day. And for everybody, tomorrow is another Christmas season day, and tomorrow is another interview. You can already be thrilled who's next. This was one of the most thrilled interviews I have been in a very, very long time. Thanks for doing this,
Thanks.
JG.
Thanks for having me. Okay. Good to see you.
Talk to you
Take
soon.
care.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.